Coming from a data science background, I thought the loop over items node would be utilized quite a bit within n8n. I thought there would be options for it to either act as like a for loop or a while loop, and this would be something that would be utilized in almost every workflow. But that's just factually incorrect because the loop over items node should only be used in a few special circumstances. And in today's video, we're going to be covering those circumstances. After that, we're going to go over two different workflows, showing you a basic loop and then also one that's a little bit more advanced where we add in conditional logic within the loop. Hopefully you guys learn how to properly use this after this video, and you should be good to go in the future. Real quick, before we do jump into n8n though, if you do need any help with your workflows for your business, I am taking on freelance customers as well as data freelance customers. So feel free to hit me up down below in the description. All right, let's jump into this video. All right, guys, let's start up over here for the tutorial. We do have a lot to cover today, but I feel like we need to talk about the basics of the loop before we even go into some examples, right? So it's called a looped over item node, also in parentheses over here, split in batches. And what this is used is for batch processing. Now, an issue you're going to come across at some point in your career or within your automations, right, is something that's called rate limits. Now, here's the example on this side of things. APIs have different rules for how much data you could send them and they could process, right? So let's say, for example, an API has a limit of 10 records every second, right? Within your n8n workflow, if you send too much data to that API, right? Let's say you're sending 20 records every second, 30, 40, 50, right? You're going to get rate limited. There's going to be some error that populates and it's just not going to work. Also, if you've ever scraped a website, right? If you scrape website pages too fast on a specific website, you're going to get blocked. Websites have different rates that they may allow you to scrape, which, by the way, scraping isn't always allowed on every single website. Sometimes there's rules associated with it saying, hey, you can only scrape, I don't know, let's say you can only scrape 5 pages every 10 seconds, right? I just threw that out there, but sites do have rules associated with that. I covered that a little bit in my scraping series, but regardless, if you go too fast, you're going to get blocked on the web scraping side of things. So the idea is we want to batch items, right? And the reason why we want to do that is it slows down the processing time, right? So that way we can match, let's say, for example, 10 records every second, but we can still be efficient, right? And by default, it has a batch size of 1 here in n8n. I wouldn't always recommend doing 1 at a time. Again, we'll talk about some use cases here in a second. But that's the reason why this loop over items node exists, right? And I want to also add that some nodes already have batching in them, so it's not always needed. So what I want to show you guys first is 2 workflows on this side of things and kind of demonstrate how this specifically works, right? So this is our first workflow over here. And just to show you how to generate this, right? All these nodes are pretty basic nodes that should have covered already here in this series that I have here on the channel. Kind of a plug for that. We have well over 30 videos, but we're using the manual trigger, right? We're going into the edit set. So edit field set, we're using a split out node, split out, and then we're also using an AI agent, right? So that is everything we're using over here. Our chat model we're using right now is GPT-5 Mini. If you're watching this in the future and you're like, why are you using GPT-5 Mini? Well, that's because I'm recording this in 2025, right? But anyways, not the go over too much of this side of things, right? Starts the workflow. What I have on this edit set fields is I have an array of different sports. I have baseball, I have cricket, and then I have basketball. Now I split these out to have separate items. So you can see over here, I have a table with sports, right? Baseball, cricket, basketball, pretty basic, right? You can see the JSON associated with it. What I'm going to do is send these 3 items into the AI agent. I think this is where it gets confusing for people, right? You're like, okay, well, I'm sending 3 items over here. How does this work on the AI agent? Well, the AI agent processes them one at a time, right? So essentially what I do is I go over here and I drag and drop the sport, right? JSON.sports. And I said, you're a researcher for the sport. and it goes one at a time, right? Baseball, then cricket, then basketball. Return the name of the person who had the biggest impact on its growth. Only return the first and last name, right? And it's interesting, in baseball, they put Alexander Cartwright. Probably not the first name I would have thought of, but W.G. Grace and Naismith, right? Like 100%, 100%. I don't know, like on the growth side of things, Cartwright. I mean, I know he was a pioneer, but like if I was thinking about growth, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like Babe Ruth had a huge growth impact of the game. There's players before Ruth, obviously, as well. Cartwright's 1800s, Ruth is 1900s. But not to get on the baseball side of things in this argument, this is what our AI agent populated, right? But you can see that we have all these results over here labeled as output. We have the name for each of these, right? So it took this 3 items, it goes 1 item at a time and gave us the results, right? And as I mentioned over here, right? So n8n processes entire node, all items before moving on to the next one, right? So it takes these 3 items on the split out, processes item 1, processes item 2, processes item 3, and then it is right over here at the end. So this is kind of where people get confused, right? Because like going into this, like you might think, oh, well, we're using this AI agent, right? Let's build this out in a loop. And just to show you the loop, which isn't more efficient, right? In my opinion, being efficient is having a workflow like this, where you have less nodes, less things that are prone to breaking, and you understand what is going on and everything, right? Whereas this, you have a loop, and now you have an extra node in over here, all right? And things could possibly break, whereas this is a much cleaner setup, right? Again, what we're going to do is we're going to have the same edit fields. We're going to have the same split out over here, right? And I should probably execute these just so we can go through this. And actually, hold on. Instead of doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to execute the whole workflow. So you can just see how this works, right? So goes through item 1 and goes to our chat model, right? Goes through item 2. And then it's going to go through item 3 here in a second, right? 1 item at a time. I'm not even telling you how to use the loop over items yet. I just want you to take a look at how this works, because you might not even need the loop over items, as n8n gives you that warning. And you can see over here, right? We have the done branch, and we have the output, Cartwright, Grace, and it says Michael Jordan this time on the basketball side of things. And you know what? I want to say I kind of agree on that side of things. Naismith obviously is the founder of basketball, but I think Jordan had a huge impact. I know people are going to disagree with WG Grace, but he was an early pioneer as well. I don't think there'd be cricket without Grace. But regardless, on this side of things, right, you can see we got the same output whether we used a loop over items or not, right? So unless you're really worried about rate limiting, I wouldn't really focus too much on the loop over items. And just to show you, like even n8n warns you, you may not need this node. n8n nodes automatically run once for each input item, right? As I showed you above, right? We had the split out. We had 3 items. This ran once for the first item. It ran twice for the second item. Third time, right? It ran once for baseball and went through over here. Your researcher for the sport, baseball, return the name of the person, right? And again, like obviously I would want to put more of an output than just the first name, last name, right? I would want to have some sort of reasoning behind this. But this is just a basic example for you guys, just to see like it goes 1 item at a time, and we have the final results over here and the output, right? We have 3 items here at the end, just as we have 3 items over here. Like the loop over item was pointless in this instance. Okay. So let me explain how loop over item works. So when you search loop over item, so you go loop over here, it says split the data into batches and iterate over each batch. Now it's interesting because when you populate this in over here, you're going to actually get 2 nodes, right? You're going to get this node over here, which has the loop, the done, and then it has this replace me in over here, right? And if you do this to start a workflow, right, it'll just have a manual trigger. But if you already have a workflow, it's going to start with these 2, right? So to jump in over here, what you have on this side of things is your batch size, right? And this is how many items that are going to go through the loop 1 at a time, right? So by default, it is 1, but you can change this. You can say the batch size is 10. You could say it's 100, right? And I would play with it depending on what API that you are working with. And, you know, we'll talk about this here in a second, but there's documentation with essentially every API that you would want to use, right? So go into the docs do some research and see. Like, and if you don't want to go through the docs, if they're public facing docs like this, right, you could use a tool like Perplexity, search it and just ask for a citation. Obviously, you want to probably double check based around it, but you know, it might be a good starting point for you if you don't want to go into the developer documentation. Now, I think this is pointless as it is, to be honest with you. I think this replace me should have had this weight in it. And that would be like one of my critiques on this side of things, right? Again, I love n8n, but I think like I think this would make a lot more sense for people if you automatically throw the weight in here for the loop over items, because when you're batch processing, right, you would want to have some sort of weight associated with it. And this is another node. I actually don't know if I'm going to make a full video on the weight node or not. It's kind of pointless, but at the same time, there is some use cases for it. But regardless, right, default 5 seconds after time interval. And you can change this to second, minute, hours, days. Again, just depends on the rate limits. I'm just going to keep this as 5 seconds in this instance, right? And where you would want to put this, and just to show you, is like, let's say, well, in this example, right, we're appending rows into a Google Sheet, right? So after we took an action, maybe you want to wait. So in this side, I waited 2 seconds, and then it's going to go through the next loop, okay? So at the very end, right, once you go through the loop X amount of times, you go to this done node. As I show you guys right over here, right, you can see 3 items are done, and that's why it is on that side of things. Now, there is a bunch of different properties or settings for errors and different things like that, or if you want to always output data. And we're not going to cover that specifically in this video. In fact, I'll have a whole video talking about errors and things like that, and to watch out for. It'll probably be like a 30-minute video. Like, there's so much to cover on that side of things. But regardless, right, like from the very basics, this is how it works, right? Use it for batch processing. Use it if you want to slow down your workflow if it's going too fast, right? That's the point of the loop. And again, let's go through an example, right? And a common one that people use it for is like Google Sheets, right? Because you can't upload a ton of data into Google Sheets. Like, you're going to get rate limited at a certain point, right? So what I have over here for this example, and I changed up the data a little bit, right, is I have a baseball Hall of Fame. Now, this is an array of 100 different baseball Hall of Famers, right? I go over here to execute step. Like, you can see all of this information on this side of things, right? A lot of baseball Hall of Famers across different eras, all in over here. Generated by ChatGPT, by the way. I did not type this all out, okay? So we have that on there. Then I'm going to go to the split out, right? Because we only have one item here, and we're going to split this out. And then you're going to see on this side of things, I actually made a mistake because this should be Baseball Hall of Fame. I didn't run this beforehand, but yeah, we'll just change this over here to Baseball Hall of Fame. And you can see we have 100 items, right? So if we go to this table, right, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Ted Williams, Lou Gehrig, Mickey Mantle, Stan Musial, Joe DiMaggio, Ty Cobb, Roberto Clemente, etc., right? All the way through 10 because I have a page size of 10. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to loop over all of these. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and choose a batch size. Now, for this example, I'm going to do a batch size of 10, right? Google Sheets should easily allow you to add more than 10 rows at a time, but we're going to just do it 10 for this use case in the video. Keep it super basic, right? And just to show you, like, I have this spreadsheet over here in Google Sheets, right? And what I have over here is Hall of Fame. I have player, and that's it, right? Active players, which we're going to cover in this next use case, I have over here. It's completely empty. Right. So what we're going to do is we have these 100 items. Okay, cool. Now we have this loop over items on this side, right? Batch size of 10. What we're going to do is append row over here. Now, what I need to do specifically is grab this player value, and we're going to go and add that in. So we have this on that side of things, right? And maybe I want to execute previous node. Just grab this over here, have the baseball player. Okay, cool. And what we're going to do is now just run this workflow, right? So batch size of 10, right? We're going to append a row and sheet. We're going to add in the player name, which will be added over here in this Hall of Fame tab, right? Again, I specified baseball n8n for the Google Sheet, Hall of Fame tab on the sheet side of things. And then after that, right, which this is going to populate 10 rows, we're going to have a wait. And I'm going to say wait 2 seconds It's going to go through, right? Grab the next 10, append, wait 2 seconds, go through, right? So this is going to run 10 times, right? We have 100 items. We have a batch size of 10, right? So 10 times 10, right? 100 items. And that's how you can think of this, right? And maybe I'll put a node over here just to talk about batch size, right? So you have your total items, right? Items, in this case, it's 100, right? Then we have the batch size. So batch size equals 10. Okay. So now our loop has to run 10 times, right? So total items, or what total equals batch times loop, right? So you can think of it like that, my nice spelling of loop, but that is how it works. So what we're going to do, I'm going to execute this so you guys can see in real time, like how this is getting updated. Okay. So just going to go over here. We're going to execute workflow. You'll see 10 items got sent. It's appending over here in Sheets. Now we wait. Now, if I go over here, 10, right? Okay. Now it's adding the next 10. It's waiting again. We go over here. Look, we're at 20. Going back, right? 30. 40. Right? Batches of 10 Hall of Famers at a time. Then keep going through this entire list and populating it. We're at 80 now. 2 more. 90. And that's it, right? We have all of these in over here. And then you can see in done, we now have 100 items. So hopefully that makes sense, right? This is, again, a very simplistic example. Again, look at your documentation. It'll have it. Now, I actually didn't even look into the HubSpot documentation. I apologize, but you can see right over here, rate limits, right? And it talks about these different types of app limits associated with it. This has it in per 10 seconds associated with it. Depending what you're working on, depending on like what product tier, right? There's different limits associated with this. And what's interesting is you can actually increase the API limits if you have an upgraded side of it. Again, there's a lot of documentation out there for everything. As I mentioned, just search for like developer docs, ask Perplexity. It'll probably send you in the right direction because it's usually pretty good with citations and things like that. But again, do that because this will help you out determining like what your batch size is, what your weight is, and mess with it, right? Okay, next thing, right? I just want to show you guys if nodes as well. And all right, guys, so if this actually looks a little bit different than above, I redid it. I did have one small bug and I wasn't happy with it. So I cut that part out of the video and I want to kind of restart this from fresh. But what we're taking a look at now is like what happens if we have conditional logic that splits up our data within a loop, right? Common for this to happen. And I think this throws off some people because what can happen if you don't design this correctly is this done number won't match what's being inputted in. Like it'll get ballooned. So you want to have this one-to-one. In addition, like what happens with our weight? Where should we put our weight at, right? Because you have some that are going false, some that are going true. So let me explain what we're doing on this side of things. So first, I changed up our data a little bit. So what I have going on now is we have 91 total items and we have a mixture of players that are both active and retired, right? So like Reggie Jackson, the Hall of Fame home run hitter, retired. Mookie Betts for the Dodgers, active. Ron Santo, retired. Ohtani, active. Brett, retired. Piazza, right? You get the point. So we have this across the board for 91. Okay. And then we go to the split out, right? And this is all split out. Okay. We're pretty fine on that side of things. Now we have 91 items. Now this is interesting because 91, like the division on it, it's not really that clean, right? So you can think of it like, okay, well, what do we want to divide it into? Well, it doesn't really matter. Or you don't need to have clean division. So what I have for this loop over items is I have a batch size of 20, right? So this will need to run 5 times. Now we did the math above over here, right? And why this needs to be 5 times. So let me just show you on this side of things. So like each batch size is 20, right? There's a total of 91 items, okay? What ends up happening is we do a full batch, right? So 20 times 4 equals 80. So we have 11 left over for the last run, right? So 5 total runs. So obviously I did this one first to show you guys the clean math, but don't worry about it. It doesn't always have to math out correctly, right? You can see 80 and then 11 left over. So we have 91 in total. So what we're going to do, I just want to run this and show you kind of how it works. So we have this if. Again, we split this out. We only want the active players. So we're putting the name and the status in over here. And then what we're doing is everything that isn't active, right? A retired player, which we've already covered retired players over here. No, not every retired player is a Hall of Famer, but regardless, we're going to send that over here to this merge node. And why you want to have this happen. So essentially on this loop over items, you want to have the input and output be the same, right? 20 items in, 20 items out. Keep going through, right? 20, 20, 20, right? In that case, 11 over here, 11, right? So that way, when you have this done over here, it matches the same amount of items going into the loop over items. If it doesn't match, right, you're not going to have this be the same. It could be ballooned, etc. So ideally, you want to, after you have some sort of conditional logic that changes up the loop, right, and it's not linear, you want to merge this together. The easiest way to do that is making sure that your fields are 1-to-1. So by going over here, right, I'm going to go append number of inputs to, and just make sure, right, on this side of things, and just to go, probably easier to go split out, right, we have a name and a status. So make sure name and status is going to this merge for both parts of this if, right? The ones that go into the true, the ones that go into the false. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. If you look in your data table, that's going to be over here, you're going to have some like null values. It's just not going to line up. It's not going to be pretty. So just make sure things are 1-to-1 before going into this merge, right? And then at the end, once we have our 20 or 11 in this case, we want to wait on everything and then goes back over here, right? So again, I like adding in the wait after we have whatever API call or whatever task that we want to do. Put the wait here at the very end. That's my approach to it. But yeah, so let me just show you this in real time. So we're going to go execute on this side of things. We'll take a look at everything here at the very end in a second. You can see 20 items going into this wait. Perfect, right? Another 20 items. And just to show you on the spreadsheet, right, we're populating it. So this is good. This is exactly what we want to see happening. And yeah, so there's 46 in total that were active. Kershaw is going to be inactive or retired here in a few weeks because playoffs is about to start. And yeah, so that's essentially it. You can see over here, now we have 91 items and everything is lined up correctly. And this looks good, right? And this solves for the error that I see some people posting about, where the loop doesn't have the same amount of items that comes in. And you can see, like, obviously this isn't run now. I ran it earlier, but that was 1-to-1. This is also 1-to-1. So if you split up your logic within the loop, just make sure you merge it together, whether it's like 2 inputs, 3 inputs, whatever the case may be, right? Add the wait after that merge and then just go back all over again. But again, to kind of reiterate my point, right? You don't need the loop for everything. In this first instance, right, I showed you that n8n runs node at a time. So executes this node for all items, executes this node for all items, executes this node for all items. Both of these had the same results, right? Again, this is much, much cleaner than this example over here, right? This example was not super clean. We had to go through the loop. Like, it's better off over here, right? And again, people might fear like, oh, what happens in our EA agent? Well, it runs one at a time, right? It runs each time for each item, right? So it's not going to get confused on this side of things. You dragged and drop the JSON in over here, right? Look at one thing at a time. Where you really want to use it is if you need some sort of batch processing. You need to delay your workflow in some sort of capacity. If you're scraping a website, right? There's probably other use cases, but these were like the first two that came to mind. Again, when you drag in this node, you're going to get this all together, which can be a little bit confusing. I wish this was the solution n8n gave us, but it's not. And very common to use this within Google Sheets. I see this used in workflows all the time. And again, if you use something like this that has conditional, make sure you merge your items together first, then put the wait here at the very end, loop over it. And that is essentially how n8n loops work. Thank you guys. I know it's a bit of a longer and a little bit more technical of a video. Probably up next in this playlist is going to be the nested loops, or it might be a little bit later on in this playlist. I promise I'll be covering this at some point. I think it's kind of important. But I just don't see that being used as much as just like these simple loops, which again, like first step, do you really need a loop or not? And I think n8n does do a good job letting you know, like, you may not need this node. So we'll end it off on that one. Thanks, guys. Make sure to subscribe if you're new, and keep watching this n8n playlist if you want to learn a lot more about other nodes, use cases, etc.